Looking at Christopher.
Yes, that as well, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Yes, we're on.
Okay, well, it's April 8th, 2022, and my name is Chris Hicks, and I'm very proud to be interviewing my dad today, Judge Larry Hicks. I am his youngest child out of three, and I'm here to interview him on behalf of not only myself, but also my sisters, Carrie and Amy. We're all happy to be a part of this. So, Dad, I'm going to start with when and where were you born?
Well, I was born in Evanston, Ohio in December of 1943, at which time my father was a policeman working for Douglas Aircraft in Chicago.
And he didn't work as a police officer for his entire career. What was kind of the family dynamic? Were you the first one born in your family?
I was the first one born. I have two brothers, and the family moved to Los Angeles. My father did not like the Chicago area, and my mother did not like the Chicago area, and we moved to Los Angeles. He acquired a job first again with Douglas Aircraft as a security officer, and then got a broker's license in real estate and became involved in real estate in the Los Angeles area, and I lived there until I was 13 years old.
And then when you turned 13, and when you moved away, where did you go?
Well, again, my father and mother were very oriented toward family, and they were concerned about raising their family in Los Angeles, the way it was growing, and with any number of various problems in the area. And they wanted to leave Los Angeles, and they chose Reno, Nevada, because my father had become acquainted with some real estate investors who were developing property in the Reno area in 1957.
So you've mentioned Poppy and Grandma, as I call them, but your parents. Today, when you look back, what qualities do you have that you're most proud of that you took from them?
Devotion to family above and beyond all other qualities. Both my father and my mother were totally dedicated to their children, and they came from humble beginnings. My mother was born in South Central Colorado and raised in a essentially agricultural community. My father had grown up as a child in Colorado as well, and they came from areas of poverty, frankly, and they were so devoted to each other and to their family. We always had a happy family.
What was your impression of Reno when you came here from Southern California as a 13-year-old or 14-year-old boy?
Well, it was like moving out to the farmland. Reno was only 55,000 people at that time. I had developed an interest and a love of horses, and we had all the country in the world to ride our horses in at that time, and my parents found a home with 2.5 acres, and we had 3 horses on that property, and Reno was a wonderful place to ride. I could literally ride from my parents' home in southwest Reno to 4th Street, the main, and Virginia Street, which are the 2 main streets in Reno. And it wasn't like you weren't going by cars or homes, because there certainly were those, but it was not unusual to see someone ride a horse in the area, not because they had to, but because they liked to.
And you have an appetite for the outdoors. without a doubt. I mean, it's instilled in me through you, and I've watched it all along. And did that all start to develop once you were in Reno?
It absolutely did. As I said, it started with the horses, but the extension of that was to be able to literally take a horse into the mountains and ride for a day and never see a home or a person. And that expanded to an interest in the outdoors and recreation, and I developed friends shortly after moving here where we loved to fish, and we then went into hunting and loved to hunt. My father actually introduced me to that, and Reno was a wonderful place to live with those kind of interests.
Sorry, I keep popping my pen here. Okay, so let's kind of move on to, as you're getting a little bit older, as a young man now, and you go to college. Where did you go to college?
I graduated from the Reno High School here, at which time there were only two high schools, Sparks High School and Reno High School. I chose the University of Nevada, Reno. My parents were supportive of me going to college. I might add that I was the first person in my family to go to college, and as it turned out, to get a college education at the University of Nevada, Reno.
When you were at the University of Nevada, Reno, were you a member of any fraternities?
I was a member of the Sigma Nu fraternity. It was a great experience. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I look back at it very fondly.
And what did you study while you were there?
I started off in the area of pre-med. I was interested in everything that was related to a preliminary education, and then with the potential for developing a medical interest. But as it turned out, the one field I was never suited for was chemistry or physics, and it became obvious that I was not a candidate for medical school.
So when you came to that unfortunate realization, what did you decide to do?
I decided I would pursue law, and I did that because I wanted to go to graduate school. I wanted it to offer me something where I could return to Reno, Nevada. My father was close friends with an attorney in Reno, and he was a fine man who I respected and appreciated, and I thought I would follow that lead.
Where did you end up going to law school?
I went to law school. I should add that my wonderful wife, Marianne, and I were married when I graduated from the University of Nevada, Reno, and before I started law school at the University of Colorado in Boulder.
So it's a good time to ask this question because you've already said when you were born, so we know your age now, but how long have you been married to your wonderful wife?
Marianne and I have been married for 56 years. We will celebrate our 57th anniversary in July.
So you go to Boulder for law school. Did you ever, while you were in law school, did you happen to come back to Reno at all, and when school was out of session, to do any kind of extra legal training before you graduated?
Well, I did. In my second year of law school, I applied for a position as a legal intern in the Washoe County District Attorney's Office, at which time Bill Radjo, who became a very respected man and with a political success in northern Nevada, but he was district attorney then, and I applied to his office, and I had the summer job in my second year of law school, and I loved it.
What did you love about it?
It was just the thrill of now being in law school, now appreciating the law, appreciating, frankly, the variety that law offers. Lawyers represent every business interest, represent every human interest, represent every educational interest. There's such an incredible variety and opportunity for someone who practices law. And in this particular case, I was able to work in the district attorney's office, study the law, watch some interesting trials, work on some interesting appeals, and it was all truly fascinating for me.
Based on that internship, did you apply to actually end up working in the DA's office here in Washoe County?
I applied before I even returned to law school, and I was informed I had a job if I passed law school, and which I did. And I took the Nevada bar exam the following summer and started as a deputy district attorney in the day after I was sworn in to practice law in the state of Nevada. And that was, I think it was October the 2nd, 1968.
So, what was the DA's office? Now, this is one of my favorite topics, talking about the Washoe County DA's office. But what was it like back in 1968 when you started there?
Well, first I've got to say, he likes to talk about the district attorney's office because now he's the district attorney in Reno, much to his mother's and my great pride. But what was it like back then? It was a thrill to be involved in the district attorney's office. At that time, we were given cases and we took them all the way through. We were not even divided into divisions as they need to be today. So I literally became involved in trial practice within 6 months of when I was admitted to the Nevada bar.
I remember you telling me about an amazing string of trials you did in the DA's office in a short period of time. Tell us about that.
Well, I started in the district attorney's office in late 1968. And at that time, trials were much more common than they are today. We were trying cases on a regular basis, but the time period that you mentioned is one I will never forget, and that is that I tried 11 felony jury trials in a 13-week period, and one of them was a 2-week-long trial.
Definitely times have changed. So how long were you, well, so you started in the DA's office in 1968, and what was your progression through the DA's office?
Well, I was there for 2 years and I was promoted to an assistant chief position, and another year went by and I was appointed to the chief criminal deputy district attorney in the district attorney's office. I was supervising, I shouldn't say supervising, I was working with 6 or 7 other criminal deputy district attorneys at the time. We were all trying cases, we were all working together closely, and we were very busy. In 1974, the district attorney position opened, and I had some advice I had received early on in the job was, at that time, private practice was an ultimate goal because it offered a return for someone with a family. By that time, Mary Ann and I had 3 children, one of whom was you. We had a family to raise, and someone told me, as far as the district attorney's office is concerned, you either move up or move out. And so I decided to run for district attorney because the current district attorney, Bob Rose, left the office to run for higher office in the state. It was more of a political position then than perhaps it may be today. But I ran for district attorney. I was 23 years old. I had opposition both in the primary and in the general, but I'm pleased to say I was elected.
You said 23. You were weren't you? I'm trying to think. I think you were 28 when you got appointed.
No, that's correct. I had become a chief at the age of 23, and I was actually district attorney in 1974, so I would have been 28 years old.
So sometimes people say to me, I got elected when I was 40, and they say, oh, you're so young. And I always say, well, you should meet my dad. He was 12 years younger than I was, and most of the time they don't even believe me. So what was it like being the district attorney at that point?
Well, that was a very turbulent time in Reno. I think almost coincidentally. We had some very major murder trials, murder cases. While I was district attorney and before that as chief deputy, I tried 7 different murder trials, and some of them were highly contested. One involved a double murder of a former mayor and his wife. Another one involved a bizarre insurance scheme murder, and I had some very heavy trials during that period of time, and our office did as well. This wasn't just me, obviously.
So how long did you serve as the district attorney?
I was the district attorney for 4.5 years.
And you went elsewhere after that?
Yes. When I completed the term for which I was elected, and my younger brother, Bud, had become an attorney and also was practicing law. He had started in the DA's office before I was district attorney, and then he had moved on to the Gaming Commission, and he was having success there. I had enjoyed being district attorney. We planned to go into a partnership together when my term was over. Again, finances were important then. I think when I left the district attorney's office, I was making $16,000 a year, and Marianne and I were raising a family of 3, and it wasn't easy. So we decided to open up our own legal partnership, and a month before we were going to do it, we were contacted by the Mcdonald Carano law firm, one of the law firms well known and respected in the Reno area, and we were offered to join their firm as partners.
Before I transitioned to Mcdonald Carano, looking back now, what would you say is your best memory of the DA's office?
I would say the best memory of the DA's office was just working with fine young attorneys. At that time, those positions were hard to find, and every time we had an opening or a vacancy in the office, and I had been involved in the hiring process literally from 1 year when I started there until I left there 11 years later. And for every opening we had a series of applicants, and I was able to hire some fine attorneys: Cal Dunlap, Mills Lane, Bruce Laxalt, Don Nomura, Bob Perry. We all worked together, and we had a wonderful working team. And the office, we had a total of I think 8 or 9 prosecutors by the time I left, and we met weekly. We discussed our cases weekly. We helped each other on our trials, and it was a wonderful, warm, pleasant way to practice law and to enjoy life.
Okay, now talking a little bit about Mcdonald Carano. So you transitioned there. How big was that firm at that time?
At that time, I think there were 12 attorneys in Reno, and we were just starting to expand to Las Vegas. I'm not sure what the number is today, but I know that while I was at Mcdonald Carano, we increased from 12 to approximately 20 or 21 lawyers statewide.
What kind of practice specialty do you develop once you get to Mcdonald Carano?
Well, of course, a large business law firm like that practices in virtually every area. My field and background was obviously litigation. By the time I left the DA's office, I'd had extensive trial experience. I'd gained a little maturity, I'd like to think, and I went into litigation. And we developed a litigation section to the firm, and I was very pleased to become very active in that section.
What was it like working at Mcdonald Carano for all those years you worked there?
Well, the private practice of law is obviously completely different than public practice as a prosecutor. You're serving every client as best you can. We were involved, my field of litigation was now in, generally speaking, business litigation, some insurance litigation, and some local practice. I actually served as counsel to the Reno Board of Realtors for over 5 or 6 years, and I tried many cases civilly, both judge trials and jury trials. I also had trials in federal court as well as in state court, I was typical of a number of attorneys in that litigation section. We worked well together.
How many years were you with Mcdonald Carano before you became a federal judge?
20 years, a little over 20 years.
And I want to get into the dual process you went through to become a federal judge, but looking back, I'd ask you the same question as I did about the DA's office. Looking back on your time at Mcdonald Carano, what are your best memories?
Well, without a doubt, some of the fine partners in that law firm, people who were business leaders in the state of Nevada, the Don Caranos, the Bob Mcdonalds, politically connected people like Spike Wilson, business-connected people like John Frankovich and Leo Bergen, and just some fine, highly respected lawyers involved in just about everything that was occurring positive in the state. It was a wonderful time, and I had the beauty of being actively involved in our litigation division. I was named the chairman of the litigation section in 1986. I served there until I went on to the court. We had just some great lawyers working with us. It was a good time, but it also was a demanding time. The lawyers in practice, they have to serve their clients' needs. They have to pay for a healthy overhead. They have to deal with a variety of everything from every strain of being on the right side to being on the wrong side.
So 1991, I think it was, right around there, comes around, and there's an opening on the federal bench. So what was the process that you where you began to be considered to be a federal judge?
Well, at that time, I had been in the private legal community for over 10 years and had been district attorney before that, and a judicial opening had opened in the federal district court in Nevada, and it was in northern Nevada. It was a position for Judge Reed when he had gone senior, and there was a merit selection panel selected by our local congresswoman, because at that time I am a Republican. There was no Republican senator in Nevada, and Congresswoman Vukanovich was the highest ranking Republican, and she would be in charge of submitting a name for the position, and she named a merit selection panel. So I hadn't been involved or active politically. I didn't have political connection, so to speak, but it was wonderful to say I would be interested and to go through an honest merit selection panel. I think there were 12 people who were considered, and I was truly honored to be selected as a result of that panel for nomination, and that was in 1992.
And so what happened throughout that process?
Well, I was nominated, but it was I think it was in June of 1992, if I'm correct on my year. And it was also a presidential election year. And the president at that time was George Bush, the senior George Bush. And also at that time, a high point for me, the president would personally telephone and speak to a candidate who was going to be nominated by him. And I received my call in my office at the Mcdonald Carano law firm. I spoke to the president while 21 people from my law firm were watching in the background, and one of my partners was videotaping the entire interview. But at the end of it, President Bush said, "Larry, I'm pleased to confirm that I will submit your name for nomination."
So your name got submitted. Did you go through the confirmation process, meeting with the Senate Judiciary?
Well, I went through the FBI investigation process, and a lot was pending, and this was the summer of 1992. But unfortunately, the political winds began to shift a little bit.
And
We're just getting a little close to the 30 minutes here.
Okay.
so the political winds changed. As we all know, President Clinton won.
Yes.
And so did your nomination lapse?
Yes, Bill Clinton was elected. Bob Dole was his opponent in the election that year. He was defeated, and the senior George Bush was leaving office. And at that time, there were 104 judicial nominees who were on the dock, and every nomination lapsed at the end of the year as a result of the change in administration to Bill Clinton.
And so upon that happening, what'd you do? Stay with Mcdonald Carano?
Well, I stayed with Mcdonald Carano, and obviously I did, and it was also not an easy process. There were a great amount of personal difficulty and sacrifice involved in preparing for a complete career change, and suddenly not having it and returning back to the law firm. But I did return. I never left the law firm. I stayed active in it. I went on. Became active in the Board of Governors of the Nevada State Bar, and was president in 1993 and 94. Kind of reassembled my practicing life in the firm, and went on to still continue in the litigation section and trying and litigating any number of business-related cases.
So you're a federal judge now, so what happened?
Well, in 8 years later, in 2001, I received a call that I had no idea why Senator Anson's office would be calling me, but an aide from our United States Senator, John Anson, was on the phone, and he was aware that I had had an earlier nomination that had lapsed, and he just was inquiring whether I was interested in submitting my name for consideration again. And it was obvious that there would be any number of names submitted and considered. This was really just a courtesy call to check on my interest in resubmitting my name.
And there's a good story behind you ultimately not deciding, but then deciding to put your name out there again. What's that story?
Well, the story is that call was the afternoon before my wife and I Mary Ann had planned a trip to Elko, Nevada, 300 miles from Reno. We left on our trip for Reno the next day, and the purpose of the trip was, well, we had some personal business in Elko, but we spent the entire trip not only going up, but also coming back, discussing whether I would resubmit my name for consideration as a federal court judge.
And what did you guys decide?
Well, the problem was that the previous time I had been successfully practicing litigation in the Mcdonald Carano firm. We had 3 children who were about to enter college. We were, like any family at that stage, they're worried, so worried about economic circumstances, how you put your children through college, and what you're going to do. I had transferred clients I'd represented for years to other partners. I was prepared to leave the firm when that nomination lapsed. And and I had to tell clients who I'd represented for years, I think I'm going to be leaving the firm. I pass you on to others. And it was a difficult experience. And then when the whole process fell through, we just thought, do we want to go through that again? We discussed that all the way up to Elko, all the way back. We probably spent 8 hours in the car discussing that. And as we drove back in, we concluded, for a young family like ours, maybe we shouldn't do this.
And so, did you receive a call or have any conversation with the senator's office after that?
I stewed over this for a day or two, and lo and behold, I get a call from Senator Anson's office again, and the question was asked, are you interested in resubmitting your name? I thought for a moment and said, yes. Life changed.
And the rest is history, as they say. So let's move into you getting sworn in as a federal judge. How long have you been a federal judge at this point?
I've been a federal judge for a little over 21 years. I was sworn in November of 2001.
And what is the first experience that stands out to you as a federal judge?
Well, there, as can be imagined, there's a whole series of new experiences, but the real thrill, the one that just stands out the most in my mind, was the first time I took the bench in a jury trial. And as I sat on the bench there, I suddenly realized, after being a litigator all these years and representing only one side of the case, that suddenly I was representing every side of the case, because every person in that courtroom was looking to me to be fair, to be impartial, to follow the law, and to see a courtroom run effectively all the way around. I looked at the plaintiff's attorney, in that case the United States attorney. It was a criminal case. I appreciated what he was going through, but I looked at the defense attorney and the defendant, and I also knew what they were going through. And then I looked at the prospective jurors, and I realized they also were looking to me to be completely knowledgeable, fair, and impartial. And as I looked out at the courtroom personnel, I had that same feeling. They were the same way. And for anyone who was back in the audience of the courtroom, again, it was that same feeling. They were all looking to me as being the one person everyone in that courtroom could depend on. It was an overwhelming experience.
Do you still feel that today?
I still feel it today. Every time I step into a courtroom, and particularly in any jury trial, when that moment comes by, when things are going fairly smoothly and you can just focus on the beauty of the courtroom, I think of that moment, I think of those same feelings, and they've never changed.
So, but before I kind of ask you some closing questions, I'd ask you the same one I asked about the DA's office in Mcdonald, Carano, and that is, you're still sitting as a senior judge, but looking back in your 21 years as a federal judge, or in your 21st year, what is your best memory of it?
All of it. Truly, all of it. I've loved it all. I love it today. That's why I'm still there.
Just a couple last questions that I think are important for a senior judge to talk about, and that's judicial philosophy type questions. And the first I'd ask you is, what do you think is the most important quality of a judge?
Knowledge, dedication, and complete impartiality. Just as I mentioned a moment ago, everyone in that courtroom is looking at the judge to follow the law and to understand the facts. And understanding the facts and the evidence in any case has a direct bearing upon the law. Sometimes you have a new appreciation of the law as a result of understanding the facts which are presented in the courtroom, and see that actual evidence and hear those actual witnesses. And knowing those facts and making sure that you know and understand the law that applies to those facts is why we're there. And I enjoy it. I think it's the most important part of what I do. At the end of the trail, it's complete impartiality, trying to understand and hopefully knowing the law and deciding the law completely impartially.
So, lifetime appointment, 21st year. Why do you continue to sit on the bench as a senior judge?
Well, I've actually been a senior judge now for over 6 years, and I'm still here because I still have those same feelings about the court as the day I had the honor of sitting behind the bench. It's just a very special, life-fulfilling experience.
What are the relationships you have with your court staff or personnel?
One of the great pleasures of being a district court judge in the federal court, I suppose in the state court as well, is working with the young people who come to work for you as clerks. We all have at least 2 clerks. We hire them for periods of time that are generally anywhere from a year to 5 years at a time. In my case, I hire alternating clerks for every 2 years. I've had some stay longer, but when I have an opening, I have hundreds of applications, and with that kind of interest in the position, being able to hire those top young people who are interested, enthusiastic about the law, who have so much to offer, that is one of the great pleasures of this job. I truly enjoy Chambers' work as a senior United States District Court judge.
I have 2 last questions. The first one is, how many years have you been a lawyer now?
I think it's 53 and a half years.
Okay. And very amazingly successful. Different avenues, the DA's office, private practice, and now the federal bench. But as you reflect on that entire career, what are you most proud of?
Well, what I'm most proud of is my family. I take great honor in having served as a judge. I've learned a great deal. I've worked with wonderful other judges. I've worked in the process. I've enjoyed that. But I have to say that beyond all that, my greatest thrill in life is my family. And my marriage of 56 years and my 3 children and 10 grandchildren, they're the most important part of my life.
And that's a perfect segue to my last question, which is, you have a life philosophy that you've shared with me as far back as I can remember, and it shapes my life. And what is that?
Well, that philosophy is one of balance. I'm of the view that the most important function in your life is your family. Your second most important function is your work. Your third most important function is yourself. They all have to be in balance for you to be happy, to be successful, and to enjoy what you do. And I've strived to do that throughout my life. And obviously, I know we all have ups and downs in our lives, that many of which are beyond our control, and certainly some that it will involve family. And those challenges, and just like a nomination that falls through after you've planned on a complete life change, there's corrections. But the point is that at the end of the day, can you place all three of those functions in balance? If you can, you will have led a very happy and successful life.
How do you think you've done thus far, maintaining that balance?
I feel pretty good about it.
I agree. That's all the questions I have, unless there's anything else you want me to ask.
Yeah.